Actually, you never conclude inviting people. You'll do this the rest of your lives. As a matter of fact, invite people to Risen. That works. What a nice handoff. I want to thank everyone who took part in the 5K yesterday. If you walked, if you ran, if you helped set it up, clean up afterwards, I thank you. I'm looking around the congregation and I'm seeing the guy who won it is here today. No, it wasn't me. As a matter of fact, I had an email waiting for me when I got home. And it said that I came in number 6 in my age class. You're very kind. There are only 6 people in my age class. Well, I was telling the 8 o'clock service that this very same thing, and a very sweet lady in the church, who is now my favorite member of the church, walked up to me and said, "That was so nice of you to do that, Phillip. You'd have made everyone feel so bad if you would have come in ahead of them." I believed it. I want to talk about inviting. I want you to hear about inviting. When I was a seminary student, I went to Emory University in Atlanta, Georgia. Our seminary was teamed up with a local United Methodist church. It was in the downtown part of Atlanta. It was called the Trinity United Methodist Church. The Trinity was into the whole idea of reaching out to its neighborhood. Now, being in downtown, most of its neighbors were business people who showed up in the morning, clocked out at 5, and went away. The people who lived in that neighborhood were homeless. So the Trinity United Methodist Church started a homeless shelter. And it was open during the times when the weather got cold. So whenever there was snow and ice, or even temperatures that reached down to freezing, the Trinity Night Shelter opened its doors. And the seminary students were the ones that staffed the Trinity Night Shelter. So a few times a quarter, I would go down with a couple of other seminary students, and we'd do a turn at the Trinity Night Shelter. And it was hard work, but I have to tell you, it blessed me. I got blessed doing that. Late afternoon, around 6:30, the homeless community would come and line up at the door. And being the one who was managing it every so often, it was my responsibility to open the door at the set time and let the 30 people in who had won a lottery to have a place. I didn't build the building. I didn't build the door, pay for it or anything, but I got to be the one who got to open it. And I got to be able to see these 30 people, these 30 men, step out of the freezing cold and into warmth. And I didn't pay the heating bill there. I didn't even light the furnace or anything like that. But I got to see them walk into a warm environment. And it felt good seeing people walk out of that miserably cold environment and into a warm one. They had a shower room down there in the basement of the Trinity Night Shelter. And man, those guys would strip off their clothes and get into the shower and turn it on as hot as it would go. I didn't own the shower house. I didn't pay its power bill or anything like that, but I felt like somehow, some way, I was given the opportunity to avail people to a cleansing. By the way, they'd take their clothes and there'd be volunteers there who would take those clothes and take them to washing machines and dryers. And after they switched out a change of clothes, there would be those volunteers who would iron their clothes and have them folded up. And even though I didn't own those washers or dryers or even the ironing boards or the irons themselves, I felt like somehow, some way, I was part of a ministry that provided that. Then there'd be a table set for the 30 men. And volunteers would bring in piping hot food and put it there. And it was a real joy to see them go from hungry. It was usually the only meal that they'd gotten that day. To see them go from hungry and famished to being satiated and just, wow, just bringing it all and consuming it, getting a belly full. And then after that, had a chance to go off to their beds, stretch out, quiet down. Now, I didn't provide the beds either. I didn't make them up or wash the sheets afterwards. But somehow, some way, by inviting to be involved in it, I feel like I was somehow helping provide that. A comfortable, warm bed on an otherwise cold and icy night. I didn't own any of those things that I was availing, but I got to avail it. And I got to avail it to people who just didn't have it and would have been terribly miserable without it. I wrestled with some tension in that. Was it my experience to enjoy? Was I somehow being voyeuristic? Was I somehow trying to steal some satisfaction that really belonged to the Father? But I bring this up to say, we serve Jesus, and that's just it. We get to serve Him. And we don't own the things that we give away on His behalf. He does. But we're blessed with the task of giving them away. I don't own the mansion. I work for the mansion maker. I don't have the heat. I can't manipulate it. But my goodness gracious, I work for a guy who gives you a warm heart. I don't have showers. I can't cleanse people. But man, I work for one who washes you inside and out. I still have a hard time doing laundry. But I work for one who invites you to put on Christ and will bestow upon us a robe of righteousness. I still struggle in the kitchen. But I work for one who assures that if we feast on Him, we'll be feasting on the finest fare. Sometimes I'm so tightly wound I can't get to sleep at night. But I work for one who assures us that we can rest in eternal peace. All these riches that I was able to bestow on 30 men a few nights a semester through 3 years of my life. And it still reminds me of how the Father uses normal, everyday people like me, like you, like us, to take His riches and distribute them. Are we distributing the riches of the Father? Are we spreading the riches of the Father? Are we sharing them with people? And when Jesus encountered people who weren't, He told them this very interesting parable. It's the parable of the great banquet. And I want us to walk through it kind of quickly. But I want us to walk through it. Read with me. Jesus replied with this story. A man prepared a great feast and sent out many invitations. That's why I wish I could put on a feast for people. If I could, man, if I had the means, I'd provide one every day. I really would. Jesus tells a story of a person with means who has the type of wealth and the type of resource to put on a big banquet. And he sends out invitations. He calls for people. Now, in our culture, when we want to send invitations, we usually go down to the store and we buy some pre-printed ones and we fill in the blanks. If we're being really, really fancy, we'll go to the printer and we'll address those invitations and we'll put them in the U.S. Postal Service and hope they get there. Jesus' day, they didn't have postal service. You sent a servant to go out and make those invitations. Actually, 2 sets went out. They didn't have the kind of transportation where they could just jump in a car and go from one place to a long distance somewhere else. They had to plan travel to come there in advance. So you send your invitation out sometimes weeks and weeks ahead of time saying, there's going to be a big banquet on this particular day. This guy sent out many such invitations. Many. That tells us that he's a person of means, but it tells us he's a person of heart. He wants to include many people in reverie. We work for a guy who's all into the idea of many. Read on. When the banquet was ready, he sent his servant to tell the guests, "Come, the banquet is ready." And do you see that too? Because there's a second invitation that's gone out now. The first one said, the banquet's going to be ready on this date, or it's going to be happening on this date. Then you send one out and say, okay, it's ready. Come on in. You know who gets to bring a lot of good news through all this? The servant does. And those of you who have been worshiping in the church a long time, I'm going to tell you this for the billionth time. The servants have it best. The servants of the Father have it best. They really do. We really do. We get to tell people dinner's ready. We get to go to hungry people and say, dinner's ready, and there's lots to eat. I hope we're letting that word out. Dinner's ready. Come to the banquet. It's ready. But all these people who get these invitations begin to push back a little bit. Let's read on. They all began making excuses. One said, I have just bought a field and must inspect it. Please excuse me. You know, I buy property all the time without checking it out first. You think some farmer's going to buy a field to make sure he's going to inspect it before he puts money down, don't you think? Otherwise, he'd buy one huge solid rock and never be able to plant the first seed. It's foolishness. That excuse is, well, exactly what it is. It's an excuse. Have you ever had anyone give you an excuse before? What they're telling you is, I'm really not interested, but they're doing it in a roundabout sort of way. And some of y'all who really want people just to get straight to the point, just tell me you're disinterested. Excuses are the nice way of saying, I've got something better to do. Check this guy's excuse out. Another said, I have just bought 5 pairs of oxen, and I want to try them out. Please excuse me. Yeah, we all buy used cars all the time without test driving them. Back then, you don't buy oxen that way. I've been around horses long enough to know. Make sure they're healthy. Make sure they're still strong enough to pull a plow. Make sure they're not real old. Make sure they still have teeth. Otherwise, we're producing the excuse. You might have asked people to come to church or come to Christ meeting and gotten an excuse. It's just a person telling you, right now, I think there might be a better offer out there. By the way, ladies, don't throw anything at me for this next excuse. Okay? But read on with me. Another said, I have a wife, so I can't come. Why would you think? True. Don't throw things at me. Most translations will say, I've gotten married. And we know that when people had a marriage ceremony, they had a big banquet there. What this person is essentially saying is, I've got a different banquet to go to. Thanks, but I'd rather go to this one. I've got my own show. I've got my own gig. I've got my own banquet. And that's what people are telling us when they give excuses. We shouldn't take them personally. A big part of us should understand and respond with patience. When I ask people to come and give the Father a look, give the Father a try, I often I get excuses almost 99% of the time. And I have a way of saying, hey, okay, all right, after you've tried that other banquet, let me know. I'll be right here with you. I'll be ready to meet you. And we'll go to the Father together. I'll leave the door open for him. Read on. The servant returned and told his master what they had said. His master was furious and said, "Go quickly into the streets and alleys of the town and invite the poor, the crippled, the blind, and the lame." You hear that? I've invited all the religious people. If they have other stuff to do, I know what I'll do. I'll go to the people who feel like they're uninvited. The law of Moses would have said that the crippled, blind, and the lame wouldn't have been able to go into the temple. Jesus said, "I have a heart for them." Master of the banquet invites them. Invites them, keeping with the heart of the Father. Man, they're hungry too. They're cold too. They deserve all that lavish return too. Invite them. Invite them. Read on. After that servant had done this, he reported, "There's still room for more. Hey, even the blind, poor, and lame go to the banquets to go to. They'll produce other excuses." And so the Father says, "I know what I'll do. I'll send my invitation to the rejects of the rejects. I want my house full." Read on. So his master said, "Go out into the country lanes and behind the hedges and urge anyone you find to come, so that the house will be full." See that? The Father wants his house full. What's his disposition? He wants his house full. Doesn't want it 3/4 capacity. He wants it full. Because his heart's full for us. He wants to take those riches and share them with a full house. Now, the servant gets to put that news out there. Did I hear myself right? The servant gets to put that news out there. You might think, "Well, Phillip, you're a pastor here. That's something you have to do." And I believe in sharing the love. That's something that we get to do. The church began to suffer with the invention of the professional clergy. Why? Because the people themselves thought, "It's not my responsibility to share it. That's what preachers do. That's what they're paid to do." I want you to see people light up. I want you to see the joy that comes when a hungry heart is fed, or when a hungry soul is fed. I want you to be able to see all that incredible wonderment. It's one of the joys, the greatest joys of life, to see happen. To see that people have a place waiting for them at the banqueting table. There's something that goes wrong, though, when we walk away from that joyful servants. There's something awry if we don't have that heart of the willful servant. Why? Because there's riches that are sitting there waiting to be had. Read with me. "Come, all of you